I'm John Mark Dempsey, and on this special program, we examine the standard of objectivity in journalism with an assortment of local journalists and students and university faculty, all of whom have their own points of view on objectivity. And this is part of the new endeavor started by radio TV professor Dr. Tony DeMars called the Center for Objectivity in Journalism. And Dr. DeMars is with us, as well as Dr. John Bellotti, whom many of you will recognize also as the Mayor of Commerce. Tony, we'll start with you. Describe the Objective Journalism Initiative.
Well, the idea of this is whether or not the mainstream media on a national level do what I think is a fair job as a watchdog role in covering issues of national importance, especially politics.
And what was the thing that prompted you to get started in this? Anything in particular?
Well, my research in the past 10 or 12 years has been about new media journalism, and so clearly the world of media is changing. What we used to teach in broadcast and journalism programs about newspapers and about television stations and radio is being affected by the internet. And so what people are doing in terms of journalism is much more online these days. And you started hearing things about citizen journalism and the idea that everyone now gets a voice up against the mainstream media. And yet within all of this, the mainstream media still seem to not be what I think would be the moderators of the debate, but they take one side or the other. So it was my research plus the idea that this is something that's worthwhile to have as a very specific research topic.
Mm-hmm. John, you are a communications scholar and also an office holder as the Mayor of Commerce. What's your view of objective journalism?
Most politicians like a question where they can say, I'm glad you asked me that question because I have an answer for it. Yep. So I will say that. Actually, I began my career in radio and TV back in 1972 and have done work in those areas as well. One of the things that I think that certainly is important as far as the journalism goes on the local level is to make sure that the community actually knows what their government is doing. I've been involved for about 6 months now as Mayor of Commerce and conducted some of our regular monthly meetings. And we have generally 2 or 3 dozen people that come quite regularly. But one of the things that I think that is really important is for the community to really know what the government is doing, and certainly any type of publicity and help we can get from the media is going to help.
Mm-hmm. Is this a local issue? We tend to hear it on the national level, the issue of objectivity, but do you also see it as an issue at the local level, and do we have sometimes less than objective journalism from your point of view?
Well, I think certainly as far as Commerce is concerned, we're a rather small community, and the fact that individuals may think that the major mainstream networks don't show objectivity, and with the exception maybe of 1 or 2. But as far as local news goes and what is happening in the local community, I would say that it seems to be fairly objective.
We've actually been out on the street and talked to some folks around Commerce, students and people who live in Commerce, about objective journalism, objectivity in journalism. So let's see what they had to say.
Or conservative, or would you rather not say?
I would say I'm probably a conservative.
Do you think the way the media covers the presidential election is fair to both sides or favors one side over the other?
Absolutely favors one side over the other.
Okay, which side do you think they favor?
Liberal, by a long shot.
All right. We're doing a TV show next Monday where we'll have news people and others talking about this idea of the media being objective. What one question would you want to ask about the way news is covered during a political race?
I would ask that each one of the debates be covered by someone who's maybe one time considered to be a liberal, one time be considered a moderate, and one time be considered a conservative rather than liberal.
Okay. What do you say to what you just heard there?
I think in some ways she has touched on what I'm taking from starting this. You have to recognize we're all somewhere on the spectrum, right? There is no sense of completely unbiased. You all have levels of liberal, moderate, or conservative. She's saying find someone who's kind of been in all those areas so that they can touch on that. And I guess in some ways what this point of view is a moderate point of view that says let's look on all the sides. So I think that's probably an accurate reflection of what I would expect to see. And she identifies herself as conservative, and then also says she sees the media as liberal, and you would expect that also.
John?
I think one of the things that were maybe demonstrated here by this lady was McCombs and Shaw's study that got involved with agenda setting and how she perceives the agenda being set by the media. And I think this may be partly true with what Tony's talking about as well. In other words, if there's bias in the media, maybe the media is going about an agenda, performing an agenda-setting role.
Is it realistic to think that reporters and editors can set aside their natural biases and maintain some standard of objectivity? Just how realistic is that?
I remember in my early days of studying all of this, of not really being up to the level of thinking I could be a researcher. I was just a student at that point, of hearing a journalist say, we will all bring our own biases into the stories, but we try to be fair. And this was probably 20 years ago. And I think you can look at some of the classic kinds of newscasters, like Walter Cronkite. He had his own agenda, but it didn't come across in the stories he told. You can go to a comedian like Johnny Carson. He kind of took jabs at all sides. They didn't let their own biases show through. And so it exists for all of us, but it's the sense that I think the point of journalism in a free society, in a democracy, is about being a watchdog role. It is about being the moderator of the debate and not showing your point of view in any way. Let all the different facts come out and let the people watching that decide whether you're pushing me in one direction. Don't set the agenda for me.
We're coming now to the end of the presidential election campaign. It's just almost down to the last days. How does all this apply, you think, to what you've seen over the last several weeks, several months? Objectivity in covering the presidential election? Is it more something that we're just more conscious of during a presidential campaign than at other times? What do you think how does it relate to presidential campaign? Tony?
Want me to touch on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's more highlighted right now. The reason we are having this discussion is because the presidential election is the kind of the preeminent area where we see coverage from one side or the other from different media. And it's not irrelevant in the rest of the time, but it's just much more noticeable now. And of course, in these last couple of days, as we get ready for the final presidential debate on the day that we're taping this show, but not as people may be watching it, but on this Monday as we tape it, you have heard backlash from the moderators of the first two presidential debates that have said they showed a bias. And so it really is relevant, I think, because of the presidential election.
John, part of your expertise is debates. So, and we're almost out of time for this segment, but very quickly, your view on how the debates have been reported, and have we seen objectivity in coverage of the debates?
I would tend to agree a little bit with what Tony just said. And this, once again, is reported by individuals that certainly have a bias towards the moderators. One of the comments that was made about the Republican Party was that why don't they vet these moderators before they're selected, because it seems like they tend to all be aligned with a more liberal point of view. I would say that this particular round of debates is much better than the old one. This is more a true debate type of format where the individuals actually get to make a comment and then respond to each other, as opposed to, as those of us remember, the older debates where they ask one question and another question, another question. Poor guy's 5 questions down. I want to respond to that question 5 minutes ago. And so I think this is a little better format that they're running, certainly.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back with a couple of new guests. We're going to be talking with Fred Stewart, who is the advisor for the East Texan here on campus, and also Dr. Sal Letardo, who is the Dean of the College of Humanities, social sciences and arts. So stay with us, and we'll continue this discussion on objectivity in journalism right after this.